All right, next Patreon request, and this one comes from Nola Nunejo, who asked me to do a pitch for a new Daimajin movie. But as always, if you guys would like to have a Patreon request done, just hit the link below. Head on over to my Patreon, hit the third tier. That'll allow you access to not just all the videos over on Patreon, but also allow you to send Patreon requests over on YouTube. But yeah, so let's get started. Now, for Daimajin. Who is Daimajin? I know a lot of people have, Daimajin's one of those kaiju, if you can call him that. I've heard people say, oh, he's not a real kaiju, he's an Oni, or whatever. Let's say kaiju for Daimajin. Daimajin is under the same group that owns Gamera, Katakawa. After Dai went under, they took all the IP. Katakawa took all of that, and Daimajin has recently appeared in their recent Yokai Wars movie. He showed up in the Thousand Wars Yokai movie, but they haven't really done anything with him. Now, obviously, with Gamera Rebirth, there is a chance that maybe if Gamera Rebirth does well enough, maybe a new Daimajin movie could be, next in line. I personally really like the Daimajin movies because they do something a lot different from most kaiju movies, in that they're kaiju films that are set in a fantasy era. It's like Lord of the Rings if you had a giant monster in it. That's really the best way to look at it, is giant monster. It's basically giant monster, a giant monster fantasy. That's really what it is. Now, so basically the question here is, what would be my pitch for a new Daimajin movie? What would be the best pick for a new Daimajin movie? So, how I kind of imagine it, really, what I really imagine this movie to be. This would be a period piece, but this would kind of break tradition and have Daimajin in a present day, a non-fantasy set, a non-medieval setting. This movie would not be set in the Edo era or something of that degree. This movie would be set, it would be a period piece movie, but it would be a more modern period piece film. And what I mean by that is, this would be set during the 1960s. Why the 1960s and not have that kind of uniqueness that it had before with the original trilogy? The reason why I thought it would be kind of cool to set a new Daimajin movie in the 1960s was because Daimajin has always been a representation of Japan and its spiritual connection to the past. Basically, it was like a religious figure that was meant to, protect those who are weak. Now, here in the let's give a little history lesson for the 1960s of Japan. Japan in the 1960s. Japan in the 1960s was a lot different, and it was the high point of, we don't want anything to do with our past, because the last time we brought up our past, we had 2 nukes dropped on us. So, the 1960s Japan, and granted, yes, this did change. The cultural ideals did change, but not by much. But there was, in the 1950s and 60s in Japan, there was very much, it was kind of stigmatized to have any kind of religious connection to anything. It was kind of seen as fanaticism that, brought together, that basically ushered in the fascism that the Japanese was under in World War II. So that would be kind of the idea, is that Daimajin represents the religious decay that the 1950s and 60s Japan brought on. So how I kind of imagine this movie, how I kind of would pitch this movie, is that this is a movie about a sect, a cult, trying to reawaken Daimajin because they believe Japan has lost its soul, has lost its spirit, it's lost its religious soul. And that would be kind of a cool idea of having a group who have seen, they believe that right now Japan is living off the teat of America. It's just suckling off America's tit, and they want to unleashing Daimajin would be a way to reawaken the religious spirit of Japan. Like that's how they would kind of see it. Plus, in the 1960s, the American forces have kind of like backed off from taking control of the Japanese isle of Japan. So there is this would be the starting point for the Japanese self-defense force. So this would be kind of a neat idea of this is a prove it or else kind of moment for Japan when they're battling a kaiju and they can't run to America to be like, oh, protect us, please. It's like the American force would be like, we don't, fuck that thing. That's your problem. So that's how I kind of view it. Like, that's how I would really view this, is like, this would also be a proving, like, because we've had a lot of kaiju movies talk about, like, the soul of the country and the view of it. Like, especially Godzilla -1 talked about, like, the war and destruction of it. But we've never really talked about the spiritual destruction of a country. And Japan has even to this day, there's a lot of stigma towards a lot of religious points it's kind of lessened over the years, but if you, there are a lot of other videos that explain this better than I do, you can probably find on YouTube. But yeah, that would be the crux of this movie, is that Daimajin has been awakened by a cult and is being used to, almost punish Japan and bring down, the conformity and the connection that this era of Japan has with America. That's kind of like the rough idea I have for this movie. But yeah, so you guys tell me in the comments below, what do you guys think of this idea for Daimajin? Do you guys like it, hate it, and what would be your idea to bring the character back to cinema? I'm kind of really hoping we get him at some point from Katakawa. I mean, come on, Gamma Rebirth was really good. Bring back his anime, a movie, something. You have interest after having him cameo in Yokai Wars, but whatever. Anyway, so you guys tell me in the comments below. Once again, I'd like to thank Nolan Viejo for the Patreon request as well as continued patronage. And like I said, if you guys would like to have a Patreon request done, just hit the link below. Head on over to my Patreon where you guys get at the 3rd tier. That'll allow you access to 7 requests for videos to do on YouTube, as well as check out all the videos, all access to the other videos on YouTube, on Patreon as well. But other than that, hope you all enjoyed this. I'm Mr. Multiverse. I'll see you next time in the Multiverse.